In the next administration, if we are not able to continue guaranteeing the place of the judiciary, if we do not get a parliament the next administration that can stand ground and be independent and do its work and avoid the capture by the executive, we are not going to make progress. Kenyans must have their eyes trained on who is going to be Speaker of the National Assembly, who is going to be Speaker of the Senate, by making sure that the people that are elected are people who will pick the right leadership for those two houses.
Given the recent developments, both at county and national levels, the question that lingers in almost everyone's mind is, do we have a country? To delve into that conversation, I am joined by the Executive Director of the Center for Multi-Party Democracy, Frankline Mukwanja. I am Esther Nyonje, and this is Kenya Explained. Karibu sana.
Thank you so much for having me.
Karibu sana.
Asante.
Pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Setting time aside for us on this show. We're looking forward to delve into your wisdom. And you have been in this, you sit at the heart of the political parties. You sure have a nose for these affairs, don't you?
Yeah, I have the privilege of serving here at the Center for Multi-Party Democracy for the last 14 years. Both as a program manager and the last 6 or 7 years as the chief executive. And of course, leading such a multi-party dialogue platform in a very nascent democracy like Kenya's, interacting with these various shades of political opinion, trying to renovate the political culture, trying to engage in high-level policy influence to affect the democratic standards, the democratic practice on a positive trajectory is a really exciting and fulfilling engagement, I must say. So yes.
You do have a nose for these affairs. So tell us, how far or close are we from achieving effective service delivery, transparency and accountability in our systems, adhering to the rule of law, and achieving responsible leadership? Give us an honest picture from your end.
So the buzzwords that you mentioned are rule of law, accountability, transparency, are at the core of good governance. And admittedly so, we have not, as a country, made very good progress, even in the aftermath of the 2010 Constitution, made very good progress that we anticipated. And the core of it is the weak political party institutions and organizing, that we have not had the political agenda strong enough to pursue constitutionalism under the new constitutional dispensation. So we have a new constitution without constitutionalism, and that is why we have challenges around the independence of institutions that guarantee the effective service delivery that you're talking about. That's why we have challenges around the executive overreach, which is blamed for the manipulable parliament, especially the National Assembly. And these are issues that Kenyans continue to complain about. That's why we have challenges around our democratic culture as a country, which I believe is responsible for the many mishaps that we have. That if you look at the whole social contract theory around our democratic practice, you realize this is very heavily affected by the negative political culture that we have carried along under the old constitution, repeal constitution, and under even the new constitutional dispensation. So democratic development is a progressive work, but we must see that we are hitting specific milestones. Unfortunately, when you look at those milestones, we have not hit them satisfactorily. One of it is, I mentioned that we have a new constitution, yes, but we lack the discipline to bring in the constitutionalism. Second is the independence of institutions. Under the new constitutional dispensation, of course, we bestowed ourselves a presidential system with minority and majority formations and a devolved governance. Devolved governance is being still very much interfered with at the national level. The presidency seems still to be quite a dominant force, and we're complaining about the independence of the other institutions about this. These real attempts to intimidate the judiciary in terms of the performance of other institutions that ensure accountability, transparency. You've seen that the political class quietly are unhappy when independent offices like the controller of budget, like the auditor general, are speaking to accountability issues. We have seen that there is heavy political interference around the DPP, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, which again is a very key independent office. We have not let Chapter 15 constitutions, in the Constitution, the constitutional commissions to act independently. You can see the headlines today around the work of the selection panel for the IEBC. It tells you that there are people in the system that are determined to ensure that the processes are producing results that favor their wishes. If you look at the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, you look at the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, where a lot of human rights abuses, abductions, murders involving police, all these issues, without a strong Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, which released statistics and reports about the violations of fundamental rights and freedoms. But it is being dismissed at the high level. Are they being sufficiently financed? Does Parliament treat their reports with the seriousness that they deserve? So all these things tell you that we are standing facing in the right direction, but we are making 2 steps forward and 1 step backward. So we're almost stagnant, even under a very good post-2010 new constitution dispensation. So while it's work in progress, I am not happy with the pace at which we are moving, in as much as we turned and faced the right direction with the new constitution dispensation.
Well, that is very worrying. Safe to say the system is not working. Last year, 2024, we had the anti-finance protests where the younger generation were in dire need for reforms. So what we're witnessing is an intergenerational change. What you've given is that the system that has been in existence has let us down. And now we have the new blood. They're so pumped up. They want change. They want reforms. So we started from here. Has the previous generation failed us? Have they brought us to where we are today?
I think we cannot approach this conversation, Esther, from a finger-pointing point of view. I am a firm believer, and as a student of democratic governance, that bad leadership is painful, but the death of democratic norms is fatal. And this has been a mission that each of the generations, from pre-independence to the independence generation, to the second liberation, and the other actors in the religious and civil society, in the political formations, and the Gen Z uprising. I think each of these moments and the leaders, they have been informed by something. If the previous generations were as not good as we would want it to look like, then we don't revere the self-rule that the previous generations realized. We don't revere the reintroduction of multipartyism. We don't revere the fight to get a new constitution. So there's been every generation having its own vision and challenges to resolve. I think this generation is dominating, and not just to pour cold water on what they are doing, is that they are doing something great. But before their arrival, there were other young people who were very determined to put this country on the right pedestal. And this generation is in a very advantaged position, that while the previous generations were seeking the fundamental freedoms and rights, the freedoms to assembly, to picket,
political rights.
Political
rights.
All these have been entrenched in this,
the constitution.
And therefore they're in an advantaged position that the previous generations fought for the survival and keeping democratic norms alive. When we talk about the democratic norms, we're talking about those political rights and the fundamental freedoms that are there. And then technology is also playing a role, that while not much can be documented other than the books that the previous reformists, the yesteryear reformists have published, there wasn't readily available infrastructure to publish and popularize the actions of the previous generations. And therefore, this is a highly privileged in terms of time, and highly privileged in terms of even innovations, technologies they're aiding. But going forward, intergenerational dialogue cannot be ignored, because unless we are transferring knowledge, unless we are transferring skills, and unless we are sustaining momentum around organizing, around mobilizing, around pursuing the issues that afflict society, and around safeguarding the civic and democratic space, we are not moving the needle. And that is very critical, that we must give credit where it belongs, and also fault in a way that is constructive criticism. The most significant idea about this intergenerational dialogue is that this generation is highly outspoken, and can also be in experiencing the dialogues that we convene, that they also can also be highly dismissive with the wrong vocabulary. And the intergenerational dialogue will help nurture some of those qualities that are required to sit and influence in a positive way. So we cannot achieve, the Gen Z cannot merely achieve by being dismissive of the older generations. And even when you look at the happenings of June last year, you cannot entirely say that it is all down to the younger people. I don't think it was a demographic issue. It was a citizen-centered conversation.
Really?
The sharper end of the arrow is actually the much younger people, because they leveraged technology. But if you look at the majority of the experts, without mentioning their names, that eloquently debated politicians on the provisions and in the budget 2024-2025, they are not necessarily Gen Zs, right? They are my contemporary millennials, they are Generation X, they are baby boomers, that they lent their expertise to make sure that there was available fodder. And therefore technology and the young people then leveraged on that to mobilize further. And therefore everyone contributed. Therefore, going forward, that nature of collaboration based on issues and not demography, not ethnicity, is the new Kenya that we need to. And I think that we all have a responsibility to move the needle in the right direction.
Okay, talk to us about this risk that comes up with what you are mentioning. A good number of people believe that there's in fact, a good number of the younger generation, that includes the millennials and the Gen Z, they believe that there's some ethics, bad ethics or bad manners that exist in the system that they don't want to be a part of. But if you talk about coexistence, how are we going to sit with the people that we are noticing, or the young people are noticing those things they don't want to see past because they understand the extent of what that bad culture has cost them? Mismanagement of public funds, there's a lot of corruption, unemployment, poor service delivery. That is what it has cost them that. So how are we going to have that coexistence? Aren't we going to be swallowed up with the same systems, and then we also pass it to the next generation?
I am not speaking about coexistence to collude and work together. I am talking about intergenerational conversations where it allows us to have a conversation about the successes and failures of this generation and the successes and failures of the previous generations, and particularly learning from experience of why did the older generation succeed with the Constitution and have failed on constitutionalism, all right? Why they succeed with the multipartyism and failed to produce and establish political parties that are grounded in ideologies. And therefore the differences between these political parties is not about their ethnic leaders and their selfish interests, but then it is based on the divergency in terms of ideas of how to tackle societal issues, because the societal challenges are shared and they're common. So I'm not advocating for the coalition of the bad manners. I am talking about learning from each other and experiencing the challenges that have maybe enabled the experience that enabled the success, or the challenges that then made the failure become pronounced. And if we have a problem with the legacy politicians, then we must begin to organize against such politics. And therefore, organizing along issues and not ethnicity, organizing along principles and not short-term things like age, because it's not a qualification. And if we want to pursue change, then it must come with our acceptance of responsibilities and obligations, right? So that it's not just about finger pointing, but it's about profiling solutions to specific challenges. Looking at these political challenges is that I pick 4 things going forward, even in the aftermath of the June last year conversations. That the conversation around Kenya's governance, democratic governance, this generation has a responsibility to push it further away from ethnicity, ethnic mobilization, electoral misconduct like voter bribery.
But that is where it
like
starts,
violence.
and it all comes back.
Yes.
If I want to vie for political positions, I will be asked to galvanize myself in my community. And we want to move away from it, but we are coming back into ethnic organization.
That's what I'm saying, that the older generation may have battled to reintroduce multi-party, and they may have failed on the ideologically grounded political parties. So instead of the current generation merely pointing fingers, they need to sustain the conversation on socioeconomic issues in terms of political organizing. right?
Okay.
The older generation may have failed in terms of social cohesion, and they did their politics along ethnic mobilization. The current generation has a responsibility to ensure that they are not splintered, they are not scattered again along those, ethnic and clan cleavages, but make sure that it is principle, it is ideology, it is the commonality of their values that binds them together to collaborate and fashion up different political parties from, the political parties they are complaining about. I see that when you have a conversation around socioeconomic issues, what new ideas are young people bringing on board, right? So that then they can be a standout even from the previous generation, that this is how young people want to approach the issue of education differently. This is how young people want to look at health care differently and such services. This is how accountability and integrity. I liked that when a shade was being thrown at the organizers of the June uprising last year, were questioned about accountability of the monies. One of them actually supplied audited accounts, right? That is raising the bar, right? We collected this much. This is how we settled. And you saw how it embarrassed the Minister for Health at that point, that they were saying they have cleared the bills of the young people who were injured. But here comes a young woman saying, this is the much we collected. This is the much we audited reports. That is raising the bar. If you look at going into the future, our politics is becoming volatile a lot more, that we're seeing the reemergence of organized groups that are causing violence. Young people must be peace builders. They cannot continue being perpetrators. They cannot continue being victims of politically instigated violence, while at the same time condemning that. So they must rise up and change the narrative by saying, look, we will compete and we have room to collaborate on issues of national interest in nature, because Kenya is home and it is our duty to make it better. We must ground our politics on socioeconomic issues. We must have occasions where bipartisanship wins on principle. We must have occasions where we must level the playing field, remove violence from our politics to make it possible for all the people to engage. Whether you are a young woman and you are afraid of joining because of the nature of our political engagements, you have an opportunity because it's a peaceful place to engage. We must rewrite the social contract because there is a misnomer. I do not believe that any employee will want to join a corrupt, violent organization. If you're walking into my office and the first thing you received was a slap, the first thing you're being asked is, the boss is there, but do something to see him, and you want to be interviewed for a job at CMD, would you take it? Mm. Therefore, the question that I've always asked is, why would the Kenya being an organization, want to recruit their highest and most valuable workers in a violent, corrupt, environment? So that when we go to the political and electoral processes, we are making it a proper recruitment process based on merit, based on your track record, based on the issues that you are articulating, and how people see that Esther is best positioned from Frank to aggregate our interests as farmers. So that even if it's talking about farmers, and a majority of them possibly are Kalenjins and Luyas, there must be an issue in that ethnic grouping. Because I believe there are issues that afflict our society, however the tribal hegemony they may be interested. The voters around Mount Kenya could be united around the need to have the agricultural produces, coffee and tea, right, to work. The pastoralists may be interested in making sure that their beef is exported. The the grain farmers, the cereal farmers in Trans Nzoia and all over may want to be united around specific issues. So if you have the best idea around agribusiness, about agriculture, about putting money in their pockets, that should be the basis of them electing you. And that is the conversation that we want. That intergenerational conversation will help us learn from from the past mistakes, pick the right lessons and experiences, and cross-pollinate the ideas as we go on, move the country forward.
All right. And I'm happy you have challenged us to have a sustained conversation and sustained method of reforms. But I'm going to ask you, how are we going to do that? Considering not everyone is looking for an elective seat.
Yeah.
How is the rest of the people going to come into sustaining the reforms and seeing better democracy and governance? Another thing is, where are we going to have platforms? Because we have had over and over again the conversation about intergenerational dialogues. Are we going to sit at Bomas and then come out of there, go back home with a document, go to my home county, sit in a town hall meeting, go back with a document? What are we going to do from there?
One is democracy starts with dialogue. If we cannot be able to have reasoned arguments, challenge each other's perspectives, have a constructive conversation on why we may disagree, then we can never be able to pick out the best idea in the room. So we must not tire on dialogue as a democratic principle. I think what has challenged us as a society is several things. One is there is this concept of elite settlement. Now, when we have an issue, the legacy politicians or the elites sit and cut a deal. And therefore, we say, since so and so has been sorted, we have been sorted. Dialogue should not be elite-centered. It should be citizen-driven, citizen-focused, for it to have the proper ripple effect, so that the issues that afflict the ordinary folks are then on the table, and not the short-term interests of the political elite. And we must defy this idea that peace or lack of it in our country is subject to how the elites settle their interests. It must be grabbed from their territories and brought back to the ordinary folks. The other issue I want to mention is of all the illiterates, the political illiterate is the most difficult one we have to address. I come across conversations that is politics. Leave it out. We do not want. You will hear corporates, private sector, terming some work that is too political. These are the same people who are actually affected by wrong policies. All right? If you have a wrong taxation regime, it's the business sectors that struggle. If you have the absence of the rule of law, if you have transparency issues, accountability, they affect more the private sector and the corporates. If you look at it cleanly, is that they actually say this is politics, but when you look at the political campaigns, all these big businessmen and businesswomen align politically and give money directly to the political campaigns of a specific regime or a specific political group. We need to flip that and have sustained civic engagement, civic education, that politics is for the others. when politics is too important to be left to the politicians alone or those that have money that the politicians look up to, it becomes a problem. So that when you have a civic agency out of informed citizenry, and therefore they are making informed decisions, it is very difficult for the useless politicians without an agenda to survive. But we need to invest in these endeavors, all of us, that they are civic actors like ourselves doing this work every day. We are overly relying on the global north to support our civic engagement, to support our democratic, electoral, and political participation processes. We can barely adequately fund our own election. We have not registered voters since 2022 because there is no sufficient budget to do that. We're still struggling to constitute an IEBC, which again, we're struggling around. So we must all be sure that when there is an environment of political instability, citizens suffer, the businesses suffer. When we are not, when the National Assembly, when the Senate are not, the county assemblies are not discussing the right policies that can affect economic and social well-being of the people, we suffer. And therefore we have all our responsibility that as long as we want change, we must all take responsibility. The corporate business sector cannot fund private politicians privately and ignore initiatives to educate, to create awareness, and have an informed citizen that will make informed decisions and choices at the ballot and have the necessary intellectual curiosity to actually challenge the political system when they are not accountable, when they are not transparent, when they are disobeying the rule of law. Those are the ingredients of a stable country. Those are the ingredients of a citizenry that can be able to call and convene their leadership and call them to order. That is the environment that can be only conducive for social, economic progress. So it's all our responsibility. Change must come hand in hand with the readiness to take responsibility. We do not want a particular political culture. We must be ready to organize against that. Right? We are saying we have a weak political culture. We must be ready to challenge and reorganize differently. And those are the issues that speak to the progress that we want.
And being here is a step to that. So ladies and gentlemen, keep subscribing to this YouTube channel if you've not subscribed as we continue having this conversation. And now realistically, speak to us. Do you think we can have this Kenya that we want? And where is the place for alternative leadership? You have seen alternative political people aspiring to be in the political space, names like Maraga, Okiya Omtata, and just really anyone from any space. Can they get into that system that has been so kept and been branded with very heavy political figures? Is there space for alternative political leadership, or just leadership in general?
Yes. We have set up ourselves to replenish our leadership, change, endorse, all right, overhaul, whichever way you look at it. After every 5 years, we have 6 ballots after every 5 years to make a decision, right? And such a time is coming in 2027. It's a huge opportunity. I know one of the frustrations in Kenya is that since independence, and I think the last 4 or 3 elections, it's been dominated by specific faces
Consistent
there are
figures.
reasons, yes, there are reasons why those faces have been dominant. I believe that the new constitutional dispensation has given us a bigger bandwidth. I mean, with the 47 governors and the 47 county executives, the 47 assemblies, the bicameral legislature, gives us about 5,000 leaders that we can actually assess and score their performance and determine that this one requires promotion, this one, and there has been that if you look at the turnover in the last 2-3 elections, it's been high in the county assemblies. Some county assemblies have been swept clean. The National Assembly, I think it's been playing at about 70%. So Kenyans are actually changing leadership. But the biggest problem that we have is that we are using the same script always to determine new leadership. We cannot go to an election where electoral malpractices such as voter bribery is key. We cannot go to party primaries where violence is king. We cannot engage in coalition arrangements based on ethnic census, and determine that we are actually making change. We have to affect the political culture, shift the conversation to what we want to hear and not what the politicians have to offer, critique that based on our principles, based on our values, based on our morals as a society, to align what we want with the kind of leaders. I can certainly confirm that we have a leadership that we deserve. William Ruto did not force himself on us. There were other candidates on the ballot. The MCA that you have did not force themselves on you. So the young people that registered and didn't find any reason to vote in 2022, the young people that didn't find any reason not even to register as voters in 2022, there's an opportunity now to register, and there's an opportunity now to actually come out and vote in 2027. Clearly, having your own checklist, I want an MCA. What do I want that MCA to be able to do? What are they saying about their oversight capabilities? What are they talking about? The new policy and legislative proposals they will bring about when they are elected. How have they performed in their previous duties where they are coming from to seek this MCA position? That tells you how they will represent, how they will aggregate the interests of their representatives. And these are things that we have to have a conversation about. So we cannot use the same approach and expect change. How much are we taking responsibility for our own actions? Right? When a leader comes with an agenda, but then you say, you said much. Where I come from, they'll say, just stand straight like this. We find for ourselves what is in those pockets. Right? Yeah, where I come from, you need to speak about, farm inputs. You need to speak about the cost and quality of those farm inputs. You need to speak to storage of the farm produce. A lot of the losses farmers from where I come from in Trans Nzoia are experiencing is post-harvest loss because we do not have storage. If someone has done their cabbages, have done their kales, they have done their maize, if you do not store it well, it is a waste. We need the feeder routes to the market. We need to speak to the conditions at that market and whether the prices and the market forces are conducive enough for the farmers to make a difference when they engage in these socioeconomic activities. We need to speak to access to land. We want a lot of these young people to be self-reliant. But if you look at our land tenure system, and we are an agroeconomy, We are yet to be industrialized. We have a bit of a good service sector. But if you're talking about tourism as a service sector, all right, how much of that land actually belongs to the younger generation, all right? How do we tap into that natural resource? So all these things are issues that must be canvassed when we have an opportunity. How much is health going to be a conversation in the 2027 presidential race? How much of university funding model is going to be something that we're going to discuss? We're talking about university funding model when if you have a young 3 to 5 year old who needs the early childhood development education, we have devolved that. It is an entirely privatized sector. Do we deserve our education being privatized? Why aren't public ECDs not functioning well? Why are public hospitals struggling? Why are we now having significant institutions of higher learning like University of Nairobi in debt, right? Why are we having, like today's headline is that in terms of I've seen something about America complaining about the increase in our fake title deeds. So we cannot go on the international market and make ourselves reasonable enough in terms of even seeking those grants or loans that we need to develop our infrastructure, because part of that collateral is usually land, natural resources. And the lenders are complaining that there's an increase in fake title deeds. How do you work out these things? So unless we put these things as our people's agenda on the platform, then the politicians don't speak to those things. Finally on that is, my experience with political organizing is you cannot go to a specific party and easily influence from merely speaking about it. You have to be part of it from the word go, or when you enter that, you must make it your presence felt through your ideas, through your organizational skills, through mobilizing others to buy into that idea. We cannot run away from establishing political parties. We cannot run away from challenging the political parties that are there to get better. We cannot be having very good Kenyans. There are so many women running the private sector and delivering. There's so many women managing public affairs, running schools, chair ladies of markets, and we can see running very efficient chamas. Why are we not encouraging this cohort of leaders who have proven themselves elsewhere to have an opportunity into public service and elective positions? These are critical issues that we have to mention and deal with adequately. Young people going into 2027, we must demand that the responsibility is to demonetize those campaigns. That the very basic vice, the most commonly promoted, unfortunately, electoral malpractice that has messed our social contract is voter bribery. We must name and shame those leaders who have no other idea but to buy. We must resist that temptation. We must therefore make the election campaign, I think it's Article 88, let me look at it. If you look at this constitution, Esther, I think 88 on the functions of IEBC, and you go to 88, yes, 88 4I, the commission is responsible for conducting or supervising the referenda, blah, blah. If you go to 4I, it says the regulation of the amount of money that may be spent by or on behalf of a candidate or party in respect of an election. What would be the motivation of me using 100 million shillings to become your governor, when at the end of the day I'll make, in the 5 years, possibly have that, how do I want to make the other half? Why have we demanded that our leaders cannot attend social functions and just contribute their 200 or 1,000 like anyone else? Why are we making leadership about social welfare dispensation? Where do we expect this money to come from? So we must go to 2027 with some of these things sorted out. That money must not be a factor. It is ideas. We must lower the cost of our elections. Why should we spend 70 billion shillings on our election when even developed economies that we are borrowing from are barely using that? Kenya has the second most expensive elections. Our ballot paper has more security features than our currency. Why are we doing this to ourselves? So it is more of a citizen responsibility. The leaders that we have are a reflection of us. When we demand from them before elections, they will take from us after elections. It is just common sense. Change must go hand in hand with responsibility.
Well, I would say that would be the parting shot, but with all you've said, I know you've said it so vehemently and very key points that should be out there. Now crown it for us, crown it all with the actionable steps from all actors. Just a word for anyone who is listening.
For me, where I sit is that our politics has been largely a monologue, where we are mobilized and brought to a place to hear what the leader has to say and be demobilized again to go to where we have come from. 2027 must be different. We must be the ones organizing in our own spaces and driving a conversation about what we want and how we want to be led in the things that we want done. We must shift from our politics being a monologue. That issue of disrespecting and dignifying our young people and our on trucks and going around and dancing and serving politicians must end. Young people, women, the elders, the churches must demand that you want to speak to us, you must find us in our comfort zones. We must be the one taking responsibility to drive that change. We must sustain that we want to have a conversation about how to be led and what the issues we want our leaders to aggregate and the interests we want them to pursue. Our politics going forward must be a dialogue. It cannot be a monologue in the conveniency of the people who want to lead us. Town halls must be organized by us. Those under the tree conversations and public barazas must be our thing. The churches must take 10 minutes out of the church service and the mosques and all those places of worship to speak to civic engagement, to speak to civic education, to speak to political education. We must not wait for Parliament to allocate resources for IBC to conduct this. We are knowledgeable, we know, and we must help each other so that then we sustain those engagements. And in between elections, again, leaders must be made to come to the places where people are and engage principally without any strings attached and go serve. In the next administration, if we are not able to continue guaranteeing the place of the judiciary, if we do not get a parliament in the next administration that can stand ground and be independent and do its work and avoid the capture by the executive, we are not going to make progress. Kenyans must have their eyes trailed on who is going to be Speaker of the National Assembly, who is going to be Speaker of the Senate, by making sure that the people that are electing are people who will pick the right leadership of those two houses so that they can give it parliamentary independence. Today, I reckon that we're easily drifting towards a majority dictatorship and a presidential dictatorship.
That is where you're leaving it at. Very well said. Thank you so much for your time.
Asante.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've had this conversation from this side, and the question comes back to you. What role are you playing to move from dialogue into taking bold steps? And we have been well challenged. So let us know your thoughts on the comment section. Share your views, comment, like, share this video to as many people so that we are all aware. And let us know if you want us to talk about more topics. Let us know what you want to see us talking about on this platform. And until next time, stay bold, stay informed, and stay hopeful. Kenya is ours to build. Thank you.